Hi, I will just start. I'm Serena from Asia Society Switzerland, and yes, I brought chocolate. It's in the back. In Zurich, we're lucky to have an executive director who used to be a tech columnist and part of the tech startup scene before joining Asia Society Switzerland. And that means we use a myriad of tech tools all the time. And it really helped us to get into the pandemic and through the pandemic. So we were using Zoom, Slack, and Asana even before. But honestly, I still have a lot of trouble adapting. So just clicking through the conference app, that was really dizzy to me. And more often than not, I use an empty Word document when carving out a new project, because apparently that's just how my brain works. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about our shared tech futures. With session 8, Technology for a Better Future, and they will cover it all, from new challenges and opportunities presented by technological advancements, their role in creating a more inclusive future, as well as mitigating risks associated with it. The two speakers are Shinto Nugroho and Eugene Yi. I think I'll skip the bios because they're in the conference app. I'm really sorry. And then I will just hand over to Duncan Clark right away.
Thank you, Serena. Merci. Dankeschön. And thanks to Bob on piano, everybody. Bob's doing a great job in the back. You can't see him, but Bob's going to fade out now. So I think we should just have the music throughout the whole session. And in fact, throughout our whole lives, I think would be great. Okay, Bob he's paid by the hour, so he's going to keep playing. So I'm Duncan Clark. I was class of 2006 here in Seoul. Represent those in the room from 2006. Wait, where are they? They're having their nap now. Oh, no, that's really depressing. Fritz is here. Where's Fritz? Oh, he popped out. But yeah, it all started here. So if you don't like Asia 21, it's Korea's fault. That's why. No, we're very happy to be back in the city where it all started. And I also have a role on the Global Board of Asia Society. And with Fritz and some others, we set up Asia Society in France. I'd like to thank Switzerland for allowing us to come to the European continent as well, because they were the pioneers. And so we have great cooperation with Asia Society in Zurich. But our topic today is technology. We try to make it a bit more uplifting. I think the last session, by the way, was amazing. And I really felt that's the power of this network. There's lots to unpick there. But technology also involves lots of opportunities, but also lots of challenges. And so I'm going to shut up. We're all, by the way, Asia 21ers. Shinto was 2012 in, which city was that? Gurgaon, that's right, the one I couldn't make. Yeah, and I also, Eugene, I didn't make it to Melbourne, but Philip was a big part of that, I'm sure. But I heard both were amazing. Okay. Oh yeah. So how many from your class? So who else was in Gurgaon here? Yep. Okay. And then Melbourne, we had more people as well. Oh, Melbourne. Okay. Right. So yeah, you're condemned for life to be in this organization, whether you like it or not. The problem is, having joined the first one and now being in my mid-50s, I'm still seen as the youth wing, which is not. But that's why I moved to Japan, because I feel really young in Japan. So it's I recommend it. As you get older, just move to Japan. It's fine. I'm helping people on and off the bus. It's great. So and lots of warm seats. Japan is a great place to get old. So we'll all end up in Japan. See you there. But our topic is technology for a better future. We've heard about how tech is not helping. I mean, with drones, and we heard about the dome, so there's some military applications. But let's get more into the social, day-to-day life aspects of technology. Shinto, maybe it would help, I think, to inform people a little bit about your background and your current role and previous roles in tech to inform the conversation. So I'm going to hand over to you. We have a mic. If not, use this one. Yeah, it's good. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Duncan and Eugene, and everyone here. I don't think there's anybody from my class, 2012. No, I don't think so. We're a small bunch, so we usually knew each other pretty well. I am Shinto. I am Indonesian. Some of you might heard of the country, some of you might not. It's a pretty big country. It's an archipelagic, 17,000 islands, one of the biggest, if not the biggest archipelagic in the world. Currently, I am leading, and one of the sexy part of working in technology, not so much actually, but actually having to be the front person working with government on building the framework, the regulatory framework of something that usually haven't been thought about. The growth of technology and the leaps and bounds that tech company have oftentimes is unthinkable by government. And that's oftentimes elicit unthinkable or elicit unpredictable responses from government. So my work is leading on those front for GOTO and previously for Google Asia Pacific. And I think, starting from Google where the issue was content and banning and, the issues of, hatred in the social media, which I think Eugene would be much more adept in talking about, to GOTO. One of the famous thing is that, so GOTO originated, we have 3 prongs right now, but we originated from two-wheelers ride-hailing. Those that are in developing countries or what we sexily called emerging economies knew that in every corners in Southeast Asia, you would always have these two-wheelers, or in India, you always have these two-wheelers, sort of like a two-wheelers taxi that goes around and takes you places. Because public transportation is so bad, and not everybody can afford a car. And it's just the cheapest and, faster way to get around. So what Gojek does was actually using technology so that people can start ordering. So sort of like Uber, but with two-wheelers. And why two-wheelers? Because not everybody can actually afford cars. Uber is very Western idea where you have taxi and you have roads with the assumptions that you have roads. In some part of our world, we don't have roads. We have dirt roads that cars can't go in. It's also started with actually people only paying with cash before we start introducing e-wallet money, etc. And that's also the progressions of how we bring Indonesia and Southeast Asia country, because then expanding to other Southeast Asia country, the bottom of the pyramid is to empower them and to get into digital technology. And how did the government respond? In 2016, we were banned. So the government basically says two-wheelers is not part of the transportation law. And yes, you've been existing since the beginning of the Republic, but if it's not in the law, it's illegal. And if it's illegal, we will ban them. It was banned for 6 hours. And why? Because actually the platform has 2.5 million people working on it. And
these are employed, like delivering or driving or...
Driving, part in the platforms. Our active drivers, what we call our active drivers. And they lost income. And this is one of the area where you actually see when we change our ads rate at YouTube, nobody goes on the street and demonstrate. The YouTuber would just scream or move to another platform. But when the government banned this, and we were trying to stop them, but there were just droves and droves of people going on the street demonstrating, not only in the capital, but across the archipelago. And so this shows, the power of the platform, but at the same time, the harm it could do if between business and government does not have a conversations about how to manage this. And I'll stop at that and start. Go ahead.
Great. No,
getting back to you.
Technology is a tool and as a weapon. It's one of the oldest discussions. Fire on. So Eugene, you have you've had an illustrious career, including touching on companies now known as X, but also others. Give us a bit of an insight.
Not illustrious, but I think I've had a very peripatetic career. So there's kind of like maybe 2 things I'd love to just share about myself with everyone. I'm Korean American. I think that's actually an important context because I really care about American democracy and kind of speech in that context. And then I'm a maker, like I'm a technologist, so I build stuff, and that's like probably my craft and what I do the most. But I think at the heart of how I approach it, I'm also a humanist, and like I think about like I don't think of like a techno-utopian future. Like I'm not a techno-determinist where technologies are going to solve everything. And I think the human, like how humans interact with that, how society comes together to interact with technologies, like really matter. So that's maybe like the two framings I'd love to introduce. And I've had a very random career, but if I could kind of connect the dots, it's I started my career in the bowels of the Pentagon doing cybersecurity, cyber warfare for the US government. And I quickly, this is pre-Snowden, so I quickly realized like, I think there's stuff that on the civil liberty side that we're missing. And through kind of a series of lucky breaks, I got an opportunity to serve as at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, where this is where I actually started to hang out with Duncan for the first time in Beijing, where I had the Internet Freedom Portfolio, and I got to work on like really cool hacky projects. Like I was jamming on the Twitter bot that was tweeting out like the Beijing pollution count.
Crazy bad.
Yeah, that's right. That was a problem for our mutual friend. But there's a kind of like fun projects like that, like anti-censorship around like President Obama's trip to Shanghai. Like I was like always like the young guy in the embassy that was like, how do we use these tech tools to go build stuff? That made me like really believe in the power of technology. And this is like when social media was cool. So when I went back,
I never knew that in the face.
I ended up at Twitter after some schooling, and I got to open Asian markets at Twitter, like in the lead up to into their IPO, and now X, I guess. So those are like their own crazy wild west days, and there I really believe in like freedom of expression, like the power of technology to allow people to express, like especially in countries where that expression might be censored. And this is I was like, technology can go and circumvent all of this. And working at Twitter, you see all the data and you quickly realize there's other stuff happening on the platform. And like whether it's like bots or kind of the toxicity, like and one of the interesting things there was in the lead up to the IPO was the introduction of ads and kind of monetizing the platform and seeing how that affected behavior. Kind of where my career took me after that was...
Can you just, on that point,
yeah.
How did it affect me, the introduction?
Well, so I went over to MIT to study this right after my stint at Twitter, and we wrote papers on, our lab wrote papers on like how, like why does false news spread? And it's like kind of that emotional, kind of emotionally provocative material to like polarizing content are the things that actually like get people reading and engaged, and these platforms are optimizing engagement. So as you do that, you naturally start to kind of build a type of what Twitter's calling back then like a digital town hall that has different incentives than actually getting people together. So I got really interested in the mechanics of this and started to have like a mea culpa moment where the chief media scientist at Twitter, we both quit Twitter at the same time, and we decided to spin off a nonprofit organization. Actually, with another, there's another kind of Asia society connection there too, because one of the execs that work there, James Kondo, is another. I think he's an Asia 21er.
He is our class, 2006,
okay,
and he's
right.
Co-chair of Asia Society.
Yeah, so very young,
Japan,
very young Asia 21er.
He's great. Yeah.
Also in Japan. So.
Yeah. He doesn't age. He's one of these blue zone things going on. Yeah. I follow his diet, but it doesn't work.
So basically, kind of the last part of this journey for me is we built this nonprofit that was trying to improve the health of the public sphere. How might we encourage constructive communication in an era where there's toxicity, polarization, things where like I feel like society is fragmenting. What can we do, and does technology play any role in kind of bridging, connecting, which was kind of the OG purpose that like these other platforms used to have. And so those questions really animated my work for the past 7 years, and I got sucked into the AI thing. So I'm doing a different startup at the moment. But that's a little bit of the angle that I think I could speak to the most regarding this panel topic.
Yeah, and obviously we're covering Asia, which, we heard the definition earlier. I mean, it's just massive, right? So within that, so let's look at the government level first. We have different stances of governments based on whether they're democracies or not, but also whether the societies that they're covering are even digitally very connected or not. I mean, we're just hearing about Afghanistan versus, So your point about the government, like fearing the power, I guess, of some of these tech platforms, right? But also experiencing the limits of their own power to stop. And there's a recent example in Indonesia also we can talk about maybe with TikTok.
With TikTok.
Yeah, maybe let's dig into Indonesia a bit more.
TikTok Shop was just banned in Indonesia. And one of the reasons is because it's, the government side, one of the reasons is because it becomes so massive. So it's very different because with TikTok, everything happens in their own platform. Whereas if you talk about Instagram, you talk about Facebook shops, or you talk about the other e-commerce, usually what happens is they have the social commerce, or they have, Instagram where they have the shops there. But then when they want to make a purchase, you actually work or collaborate with the local platforms to make sure that it happens. What happens with TikTok is that everything happens in their own platform. And that's also, the issues of, illegal importations, etc. That does not allow the very, very micro entrepreneurs, the makers, that make clothes, everything, to actually thrive in this sort of like platform. And those are very much the backbone of the economy. And so the government decided to sort of like split between the social commerce and the actual e-commerce. Now, what TikTok is doing then is very interesting because what TikTok is doing then, they then start working with the local e-commerce. And they have already announced that they'll be working with Tokopedia, which is one of the Indonesian e-commerce. And, basically they're going to buy up a certain percentage of shares, and they're going to collaborate really well there. And I think this could be a template of how TikTok Shops is going to be, delivering in terms of everywhere across the globe. As we know, TikTok also have another issue, and this is also going to be a very clever solutions for ByteDance to sort of like separate between the social media and the e-commerce side of their business.
It's very interesting because, ByteDance, TikTok, within China is much more regulated than without. Douyin is actually one of the reasons that Alibaba has not done so well recently is the competition. So the power of the algorithm, you talked about the power of it in terms of, dividing people, or we see it in what people are buying. So within Asia, we already, understanding this region helps you understand global, right? Just the very fact that TikTok is such a major player. Previously, it was more like Western-led, right? But now, when you were dealing with these issues, how do you look at Asia now in terms of some of the problems coming out of tech within the region as well as responding to Silicon Valley?
Shinto, do you have any response to that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should speak.
All right. I think it's very different if you're coming from a Western country with a Western perspective, and if you're coming from emerging economies with emerging economies
Right.
perspective. So I think there's no one set rule or one set responses to this because the setting are different. And even within the emerging economies, it's very different, the relationship, for example, between one country towards China and the other country towards China. And I think that's would really clutter how people respond to ByteDance with Chinese companies,
Right.
to to PDD and Temu, who's trying to separate themselves and not being branded as just a Temu, not wanting
They're
to be
Irish
branded.
or something, right? Yeah, that's right.
So
Singaporean, yeah.
Singaporean, and TikTok is headquartered in Singapore.
Right.
So I think these are some of the responses that even the Chinese companies is reacting towards the more regulated
Right.
setting in China.
So you've got two prisms. You've got how you look at tech and how you look at China, and that defines.
Because,
Yeah.
like it or not, Chinese companies in China is already a global power itself in tech. Very different than 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of a G2 world, right? We'll get into AI and big data. I mean,
Exactly.
the relevance of other countries is in question. Europe has done a great job in the data privacy side, but there are not European giants in tech. I mean, Zurich is a great home for Google and others, and they hired nearly all of your graduates, I think. But Europe is struggling to maintain its relevance. Other parts of the world within Asia also with respect to China.
Yep.
So maybe
Yeah,
that.
I think I don't have too much to add to that. Like where my mind immediately went was actually data ownership and compute ownership, which is kind of the two big things that are powering this Gen AI boom. And I think this past year has been really there's been like it's very rare when you have like mind-blowing moments when you look at a piece of technology, because you're like, oh yeah, like you can like I know how this works, yeah, I know how to build this. But I think this past year there's been so many of those moments for me that I think there's actually a step change in what these new capabilities are going to enable and allow, and what drives those capabilities are both are data, like who owns the data and who can train off of this data, as well as like who owns the compute and like who has like the silicon chips and all of this that do this. So
Who gets to buy NVIDIA, who doesn't get to buy NVIDIA.
Right,
Basically.
and I think that's where if I look at Asia, I haven't been too immersed in the context, but I think some of the more policy-oriented things around like U.S. policy towards like China, like on silicon chips and things like this, I think that's a really problematic emerging issue. And then on data, like I think one of the reasons why people are reacting against the ByteDance thing is like they are sucking up data, and like you can have, as Elon Musk was saying like a week ago to the New York Times, like you can feel the AI probing your mind. And I think there's like I think as these capabilities grow, the company, there is a little bit of that winner takes all kind of mentality here. And so yeah, I think that's kind of where my mind went. I don't know what that emerging context is in Asia or
Yeah,
Chinese
and I
markets.
think that's getting there. I think you know what you're saying, and I think it's kind of dangerous because in this context, you know, like I can talk about Southeast Asia, except Singapore, but these concerns about data is not so much. The concerns is about cheap goods. Can I get cheap goods? Is it free delivery? Is it nice to look at? So these are the concerns. So the concerns is economics. The concern is not data at all. But it should be on everyone's mind that data should be the main concern. But even at the level of government, when we had these discussions, because I was in the room with some of the cabinet members when we're discussing this, and we talk about data and says, the narrative of data is not going to work for Indonesia. And we're 270 million people. Because people would say that, well, we give consent to our data to be used and we get good stuff and cheap stuff out of it. So why should we care about it? So the work, the literacy towards it is important to keep your data and to have control of your data is still very lacking in a lot of this context.
Yeah, and I think the power of deflationary China now in an inflation-afflicted world, we're seeing it with small packages coming to the United States, driving, consumers in the U.S., for example, are embracing stuff that the government may not want them to embrace. And so it's not just within Asia. But within Asia, it's also very interesting. I just came from the reason I'm somewhat incoherent. I got on a midnight flight from Hong Kong to come here this morning after this Middle East conference is going on right now in Hong Kong, the FII. But there it gets very interesting because who in the Middle East is able to buy the equipment from who they want, whether it's the Huawei in the past and now getting to the NVIDIAs, how they're using the technology themselves. Given this China-U.S. rivalry, we see that in Southeast Asia, we see it now. Because the Middle East, I was speaking about this Middle East-North Africa tech corridor, which is now going to link to Belt and Road. It's getting very confusing. All these corridors connecting to each other, but this overlapping geopolitical challenge, plus this how you look at tech, is getting pretty intense.
Indeed. I was at the Eisenhower Global Conference, in about 6 weeks ago. And it was very interesting because the one that came out defending, China and this massive hogging of data are actually folks from Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a good Monty Python sketch. I mean, well, it touches on Palestine, but it's like, what have the Romans ever done for us? And, aqueducts, roads, irrigation. I mean, the Chinese, to some extent, like they are with the global South, there is a strong appeal. And you have this new high-speed train
we do
built.
have that.
I don't know what the debt is, but it
well,
built.
Well, Sri Lanka also have
Right.
their dam and their ports, etc., built with the collaborations with China. And I think China does that with a lot of countries in Asia and in Africa as well.
But so as we go from the infrastructure up, well, one, China's having a lot of issues financing this. It's having problems financing itself right now. But as we get into content and data and commerce, it's a whole new challenge, right? So anyway, it's never boring in this part of the region for these issues. But yeah,
I think I know with the Sam Bankman-Fried stuff, like the Web3 side, the crypto
first mention
side,
of the Sam,
has
we'll
like died down a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the data side, this is an oversimplification, but there's like the camp that's like keep it centralized. You know, there's a lot of things that you can do with centralized data. There's a lot of coordination. It's good for the users. And then like you have regulators come and then help protect that. I think that's like one stream of thought. And then the other stream of thought is like the Web3 decentralize everything. And then like we get to like have public data trusts. We understand how to maneuver and control our own data. This is what Tim Berners-Lee is working on. And I think what's interesting about that is everyone has different governance models that they care about. So how people might want to come and make decisions on how a community that owns a particular, like their data for a local community, let's say, might be different in like the Japanese context to like the Maryland, America context. And so I think those are really interesting things of like digital governance that I see are kind of like up to makers and more technologists to kind of think about, build. I don't know which of these futures will win out. But again, I think there's another Asia Society connection where there's like a Hong Kong node with Yat. I think a couple of you guys know, but he's like
he was on my panel yesterday.
Yeah, he's pushing forward kind of a lot of this decentralization thing.
Animoco brands, and he's very big in the Middle East as well now.
Yeah, with the Middle East. So it's just very interesting because I don't think we know which path things are going to take, and I think different countries are actually taking different paths. Americans and I think the Chinese are really in that centralization camp, whereas some of these other contexts and countries have different approaches.
I want to get everybody's input because it's your generation. You know this stuff more than old farts like myself. But before we do, Korea, we're in Korea. You have the Korean American experience. You mentioned democracy, the power of Korean tech, and also cultural wave. Like, what are your thoughts on, as we're in Korea, in the tech framing of that? Why is Korea successful? Or, you know?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that, Duncan. I'm so sorry. I'm not well qualified enough.
Well, one of our other, some of us know Sung Yun, who's an alum, has been a great success in the U.S. I'm an investor in his business. But, Korean tech, I think because of the geopolitical tensions with China, obviously, Korea is, I think, having a bit of a moment right now in terms of previously was, and also Japan to some extent, this flyover scenario that people would just fly straight to China and back from Silicon Valley. That's clearly over. And it's interesting to think about, the beneficiaries. I think Korea and I think Japan will be emerging. Anyway, but let's throw it to, we're going to go straight to questions now, like comments as well. We have it, yes. Our circle drawer, she's great. She can draw the best circles, by the way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sini. I'm from Singapore. So my question is, tech naturally plays in the gray space, right? And innovation in the unregulated space. And then we have, governments or regulators try and catch up to kind of set the boundaries of what's right, how to do it responsibly. But this process is imperfect because, it's too slow, right? Governments or regulators have to figure out what to do and how to do it. And often they don't really understand anyways. So then it can be too rigid. Or, as you say, it can be uneven because what might work in one place doesn't necessarily work in another. So then you have uneven regulations. And so my question is, as we're thinking about a lot of these things, and we want tech and we want innovation, how do we build in a way for that to happen in a responsible way, in a way that happens, so that you don't have to have this dance with regulators? Yeah.
Let's take one more question? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for coming and discussing this important topic. My name is Henning. I live in the Bay Area. I'm German Chinese, so data privacy as a German is obviously a very interesting topic. What I'm curious about is what kind of themes. I mean, when we heard about Indonesia, I'm not super familiar with Korea, but just from my experience arriving, a couple of days ago, the first reaction I had was, "Oh, Google Maps doesn't work." So my first question was, "I wonder why." And if you look into it, the answer is data privacy. I'm sure there's a national security layer to it. What kind of trends do you see in a broader region, or is there no trend because you have various different policies? China is very, I think starting to get very strict with data privacy internally. What kind of patterns are we seeing? I think over the last 10 years we saw interesting things where it was mostly related to financial crime and having your own privacy for privacy's sake. We had an interesting case in the U.S. Some of you might have been aware. 23andMe had a data leak. I don't think it was as bad as people make it out to be, but now you come into this whole new dimension of bioterrorism. Can people make any, weapons essentially with DNA data? I don't know. So I'm just curious what you're seeing in Asia, or maybe with some of the larger countries, Japan, Korea, China, and then I think the question you also said, on the one end, being very lax with data privacy also has its benefits with innovation. So what are we seeing in Asia right now?
Yeah, I think you fused the questions. Really helpful. You guys want to?
I have one response, which is going to sidestep it. I thought I wanted to be a regulator when I grew up. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Were you like 5 at the time?
Yeah.
No.
I'm like, I'm going to be an astronaut or a regulator. And I think it's because of the speed thing. I think I was like, I thought that was going to be one way to do socially impactful work, right. As someone who knows the technology, but then can help rein in the parts that are problematic. And I think my time at the Media Lab, at the MIT Media Lab, actually really changed my philosophy and approach. And I think it changed it to, they're what they call like constructionists, which is like, how do you invent and like add new things that are positive examples of technology, and how do you design that? And thinking about those design processes, like how do you construct these constructive technologies? I think that's, I felt like that's the path that I want to take after my experience there. And there, I think these are very big, hairy problems that we deal with, whether it's like speech and media or mobility. Like I think, self-driving cars and like who people are going to hit. Like I think there's a lot of interesting kind of moral society issues, and the technology is one part, and I think the process of like how we come together as humans is like maybe where we need to start that design process. I don't think these terms like human-centered design or participatory action research are sufficient or actually encapsulate the approach that we need to use to design these constructive technologies. So I think there's like really, really interesting new space for us to grow and think about adding as opposed to reining in. Maybe that's like a little bit of a sidestep, but that's been my experience.
Okay, I think the dance with the regulators is inevitable. Again, because of the speed and everything, innovation still needs to happen. But I think what we'll be seeing is that there will be more governance, there will be more conversations about governance, and there will be more trust building as well, which is really, really needed between the tech community, business, and also government. And I think in the previous, if we see the previous iterations, it was government is always at the forefront. Like what Eugene said, government comes in and builds the regulations and everybody follows. That works for mining and that works with natural resources. That doesn't work with technology at all. And the way technology is growing in leaps and bounds right now, the government is also to learn. But not all government wants to learn. So having these conversations with the right level of people within the regulators that understand and wants to learn, I think that's the job that's, a lot. Some people will be the makers, like Eugene, and some people will be like me, who talk to these people and doesn't really understand. So I talk to my government folks and say, so Shinto, how does it work? And I actually don't know. Let me talk to my engineers and, let me get. And then the engineers would be like very confused talking to government, but you need these people all to sort of like bridge. And there will be a dance, definitely. There will be days where government will be shocked, like what we have right now, that, hey, how come this technology has been so advanced? And how come they're just so everywhere and we didn't even realize about it? We're late. And when you're government, I've been working with and within government previously, and commerce at that. So there's a lot of fear. And when government fears something, they have a really big powers to ban. And this is something that we really need to be aware of, which is why the dialogue can't stop. I think that's just...
Great. Well, as we're the tech panel, I'm getting Sanjeev's like we have to end here. Is that right? But as we're the tech panel, we can continue this in the Hoover cool app that we have. 1993 tech, I don't know, but let's make it work. Let's make Hoover great again. And speaking of dance, let's bring back Sam on the piano so we can move to the next session. I think we'll just continue our discussion online and at the bar, most importantly. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.